Welcome everybody for joining this session. First of all, thanks so much to Dorit, Jordan, Dotan, and Judith Joseph, who have kept this series going. And it's really technically already its third season. So thank you for all your efforts. Also, thanks to Cheselyn, Amato and Chana, Wiesenthal-Elias for helping out. And I'm giving it back to the curators.
Welcome, everybody. It's so great to see you all. It feels like a long time since we've been together, so I'm especially happy to see you. This is the third edition of the Jewish Art Salon Open Studios online programs. The next program will be Sunday, September 19th at noon Eastern Time. Featured artists will be Gabriela Boros, Efrat Baller, and Sandra Indig. Today, we will present Diana Kurtz, Jacob Genen, I'm sorry. You just told me how to pronounce it.
It's Jannan.
Genen and Joel Silverstein. Links to their websites or Instagram are in the chat. Please type your questions and comments into the chat. Before I introduce the first presenter, I just want to wish everybody a sweet, healthy, joyful New Year, 5782. All the best for all of you. And hopefully we'll be together a lot. In person and online. Diana Kurtz was born in Vienna, Austria. She has exhibited her art in solo and group shows in the US and Europe, and has worked in many distinguished collections, including Corcoran Gallery and the Rose Art Museum. She has received numerous awards, including, among others, a Fulbright Fellowship to France. She studied at Brandeis for her BA and Columbia for her MFA, and taught at several various prestigious art schools. Diana, I'm going to share my screen and show your presentation, and you just tell me next when you're ready to go on to the next slide, okay?
Fine, thank you. I don't know if you, I'm on, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I don't know how you planned this, but I'm very glad that it's right before Rosh Hashanah, because Genesis is a new year. I'm always hopeful. And after this dreadful year that we had with COVID and the fires and the floods and the hurricanes and all the climate change, maybe this will be a year of change. Hopefully the last couple of years have been difficult. And my hope is very much for the younger generation, who seems much more conscious than my generation. Well, as Jews, we're supposed to follow Rachmamin b'nei Rachmamin, which means we should be compassionate children of our compassionate ancestors. And I feel as Jews, we almost have well, everybody has a moral obligation, but we should really think that we are really supposed to be stewards of Hashem's earth. I mean, that's what we're supposed to do in any way that we can. I'm going to start off, I'm going to show images of animals. I'm involved personally, very much involved with animal rights. And a number of years ago, I did a series of monotypes. They were very small monotypes about the way animals are treated in our society. And things actually, I did these pieces maybe about 10 or 15 years ago, and things have really changed in terms of our treatment of animals. Of course, as Jews, we're really mandated not to inflict pain on any living creature. In fact, in the Shulchan Aruch, I think it says that you're not even supposed to work your oxen on Shabbos. So we should well keep in mind our relationship to all living things, not only people, but including animals. There's also in Hebrew, Tsa'ar Balei Chayim, which means not to inflict pain on any living creature. So some of my first images are not so happy. This first image.
Excuse me for a second. Judith, can you make it full screen, please?
Oh, it isn't, I can see, yeah, they should be full screen, please. Because I don't want to have I don't want people to see what the next slide is until I tell you.
Thank you. Sorry for disturbing you.
Is it a way to get rid of the slides on the side, or is that not possible? It's okay. It's all right. People should just look at the big image. Let me say it that way. It's okay. It's okay. As I mentioned before, these are very small pieces, and I made them, thank you. I made them small on purpose, so the viewer will have to really go close up to see them, and you have that way a more personal relationship with the image. This is an image of a veal calf, And I'm sure you all know how veal is created. The baby cows are taken away from their mother immediately at birth. The male cows are put in a small crate where they can't move because they don't want them to develop muscles. So the veal stays soft. What they call milk-fed veal is usually artificial milk given to the veals. And then the mothers are kept pregnant all the time, and all their milk goes to the babies. And if you've ever heard a mother cow crying for her baby, it'll really affect you greatly. And I just want to mention that. And I think people are much more conscious of veal and also where our meat comes from and how animals are treated for food. We're not supposed to, as Jews especially, we're not supposed to use animals for food or for entertainment, actually for clothing or for sports. Next, not just as Jews, as everybody should. Next slide, please. This is a painting. It's about maybe 14, 16 inches high. And it's one of the Silver Springs monkeys. And some of you may have remembered many years ago, the NIH, National Institute of Health, would breed monkeys and do these experiments on them. Many of those experiments were not really necessary and did not necessarily apply to human beings. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is a small monotype also of the Silver Springs monkeys. Obviously, it came from images that I'd seen in photographs. And the animal rights people really worked very, very hard for these particular monkeys. And this applied to many other lab animals as well, that they used to be killed right after the experiments, and now they tend to be sent to sanctuaries. I mean, one still has to fight for them to be sent to sanctuaries, but they are more or less. And the good news is there are many medical schools that no longer use live dogs for experiments. They use computer simulated images. So I believe we are making some progress when you think of what's happening now as opposed to 10 years previously. And next slide, please. This is called Fur Farm, and I hope it's evident. You know, see this beautiful animal confined, unhappy. These foxes and other small animals used for fur they're bred and live their entire lives in small cages, and it's a dreadful situation. Next slide, please. And this is an ermine. Again, this is done. My animals are all done from photographs that I've seen because I don't go to zoos. But I wanted to show an ermine. Ermine is that white fur with little dots, little black dots. You would see them usually in 1930s and 1940s movies. They were considered very glamorous. So I just wanted to show you an ermine. This is a pastel, just in a more natural surrounding, animals in nature. And next slide, please. And this is a mink, again, free. You know how many minks it takes to make a fur coat? You can see they're small animals. And this again is a pastel, and it's a little bit larger than the monotypes. Okay, next slide, please. This is called leg hold trap. And it still goes on terribly, especially in the Midwest and up north. Trappers would lay these traps on the forest floors or on wilderness floors, and an animal very often would get their paw caught in the trap. And it's a terrible way to kill animals because very often these traps are not checked for days and days. Animals die of starvation, thirst, terrible situations. They're known to be bitten off their own leg to get free of the trap. And this is a little squirrel, which obviously got into the trap. And this is how it had to live and die. Again, this and the next few ones are small monotypes. So you have to get really close to them and engage. Next, please. No, go back. You skipped one. Yes, this is another one of the leg hold traps. I think it's self-evident. And it was very, very painful for me to make these images, but I felt I had to somehow, I don't know, I just felt this necessity of confronting them, and maybe somehow, rather than giving a lecture about our treatment of animals and unnecessary, fur is totally unnecessary, and this very brutal way, I just felt, that's why I made these images of my way of telling about what happened. Next slide. And this, of course, is a deer that was trapped. You see its leg is caught in a leg hold trap. So not only are animals that are used for fur suffering this way, but also other animals inadvertently get caught this way. And as I said, it's a terrible way, for the animals to be killed. Next slide, please. This is a very, very large painting. Excuse me. The face of the horse is about, I would say, about 2 feet high. It's a very large painting. It was done, I was asked to be in an exhibition commemorating the 100th year of the building of the Erie Canal. And I did a lot of reading about the Erie Canal, never having been up, seen a lot of canals in my life, other than maybe in Holland or Austria, but I've never really experienced the Erie Canal. And apparently in the early days when the canal was first built, and barges were shipping things from the north down to the south, and the canal was used for shipping basically. And these very, very, very heavy barges were being pulled by either mules or horses that had to work for 12-hour shifts without a break. And I want to show this here because to tell you that there is progress, or progress has been made, because with the discovery of the steamship and steam, these animals were no longer used. So it's an example of how humanity is progressing a little bit slowly. And now these animals are used just for tour, when they, like the horses, carriage horses in Central Park, it's just for tourists now along the Erie Canal. So for me, even though it's a very, I think, sad image, for me, it symbolizes hope since it no longer exists. Next, please.
Diana, can you tell us the medium of those images?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the towing the barge, the Erie Canal painting is very large, and that's oil on canvas. The other, thank you for asking, I should have said, yeah, oil on canvas. And the smaller ones tend to be monotypes on paper. Yeah, this was actually, this is based on my experience of going to the west coast of Ireland. If any of you have been there near the Skellig Islands, it's absolutely incredible space. People do not live there. This green, I call it a thing, this green object in the background, there was a monastery built in about the 14th century, and these monks lived in that monastery just to get away from humanity. But what was very touching to me were these large birds, which are called gannets. And I love the way, not only could you not see them very well inside the rocks, but even their shapes echoed the rocks of the nature around them. And I found that, so beautiful to look at. And I did a couple of paintings in which I tried to show the relationship of the birds with their surroundings. And that's the world we should have, like a really wonderful world. Just as an aside, I don't know if any of you have seen that David Attenborough film. It's on, I know it's on Apple TV. It might be in some of the other channels. And it's called something about the year the Earth came back. And it shows in this film the year of COVID, when it first started, how the animals have come out, how we can suddenly hear birds singing, how skies that had been so gray and polluted before are suddenly blue, without all the fumes from where. So maybe I feel very hopeful that we're going to learn and the world will be a little bit better. And next slide, please. This again is an oil painting. It's probably maybe 4 or 5 feet. I don't know the dimensions. I did it a while ago. It's pretty large. And it's called Water's Edge. And it's based actually on a book I received as a child, which was written in the 19th century. I'm not from the 19th century, the book was. And it's a story of the Odyssey. And when it describes the Song of the Sirens, the way it's described is that the seals came out off their rocks to listen to the music. And all the little fish raised their heads out of the water to hear the beautiful music. And to me, it's such a wonderful image. And, Regenesis, maybe one day the world will be like this again. Not that we want sirens that are seducing men or human beings, but at least the animals. I hope the animals will be as happy in the future as they are in this picture. And next slide, please. And this is a painting I Actually, I showed in one of the first Jewish art salon shows I was in, a show called Seduced. I think it was called Seduced by the Sacred. It was shown in Connecticut. And I wanted to end with this. It's based on on my experience seeing the sunrise over the volcano, extinct volcano, Haleakala in Hawaii. I was told, you're going to Hawaii, you have to go see this, extinct volcano. It's so moving, blah, blah, blah. I thought this was going to be another kind of a tourist trap, but I went because my host insisted I go. And I must say, seeing this, we left at 3 a.m, and seeing the sunrise over this Haleakala was truly one of the most spiritual experiences of my life. It was absolutely amazing. And I remember thinking at the time, well, must have been just like when the world was created. I mean, going from this blackness, and then suddenly you see the light beginning to appear. I mean, obviously it was not necessarily these colors. This is my painting and one of the 8 paintings I did on that. But it was a truly, as I say, experience for me. And this is how I would kind of imagine Genesis. So I hope we have a Regenesis and the world goes back to this wonderful purity again. Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you, Diana. And I just want to comment that I've certainly noticed early on in the pandemic, much more bird song.
Mhm.
And I've been seeing a lot more animals in my neighborhood. I live near a forest preserve, which is wonderful.
I'm going to visit you.
Sorry?
I'm going to visit you.
You have a standing invitation. So
I just want to make one comment that some of the works that you've seen were also in a Jewish art salon exhibit that was curated by Joel Silverstein, who's one of our next presenters. He curated a show with his wife, Julie, called Through Compassionate Eyes, Animal Rights Through the Jewish Lens. So I'll put a link to the show in the chat.
Yeah,
great.
I want to say too, Diana, that it was such a pleasure to see you work. And I'm a big fan, not only for your medium and style and paintings, also the subjects you choose to do. It's so important. And I'm with you on the same page about the animal suffering and cruelty. And the differences that you do between for instance, those monkeys. I wish Judith was sharing the screen for a second, but the monkeys in the cage, the look in their eyes are so strong, like they're telling you, hey, set me free. And I wonder, did you take a photo of those? Is it coming from your imagination?
Thank you. Well, anybody who's involved, it breaks your heart. I mean, I've seen some of the terrible things that have been done to animals, especially to farm animals. I've seen cows with their horns cut off and their tails cut off, and they're standing and they can't even swat the flies. I've seen terrible things with chickens. I'd be glad to talk about it, but people who are devoted meat eaters do not want to hear any of this. So I don't want to be one of those proselytizers, but if you want to contact me personally, I'll be glad to talk to you. I just want to mention what's kind of interesting about this particular image, Dorit. I don't know how it was chosen for a show by an organization called F999, something to do with, I don't know, the current state of the world. They chose this from all my work. And then it ends up being part of the collection of Google Art and Culture. And if you Google this, I don't know how they chose it, but I'm very happy they chose it. They misspelled the name, but it is part of the Google's Art and Culture. So it'll always be there, at least for a while, until Google stops being Google. So, but thank you for noticing that, Dorit. It was very difficult. I mean, these are only part of the big series. It was very difficult to paint them, actually.
I can see, very sad and beautiful painted.
Thank you so much.
I have a question for you, Diana, about addressing painful subjects, because I've done that myself, and I'm interested to know how it helps you, or if it helps you in your dealing with these things to paint it. I mean, how does painting suffering animals affect you in terms of your personal emotions and your growth?
Well, personal emotion, it's one of the deep, it's deeply, deeply painful for me. I've gone to enough sanctuaries and seen animals that have been abused. I've marched in enough marches. I don't have a lot of money, but I've donated money. And I feel like my contribution is maybe I can do it through art. And I felt, first I felt compelled to make these images actually for myself, because it was my way of really confronting. I don't know how to explain it. I felt I don't know, I just needed to make those images. And I didn't make them to show. I didn't make them for a purpose. I didn't make them for Joel's show. They've been in other exhibitions. I did them because, I don't know, why do we all make art? For many of us, if we knew why at least for me, maybe if I knew why I made my images, I wouldn't make them. You know, it's sort of, I find out how I feel about something after I work on it. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes sense. I can't help but feel that there's a resonance of the Holocaust in your work because of your personal history as really a refugee and survivor as a child. Having that empathy with the suffering person or animal. I don't know if that's too big of a reach. What do you think?
Well, I thought as you were talking, as Dorit was talking, I realized that my paintings on the theme of the Holocaust, which I've done for 13 years, and some of you may have known or seen because I've had a bunch of shows of them, I don't think they show the suffering the way I do these animals. I felt I had no right. I was not in a concentration camp. I was not in a ghetto. I did not see, I did see the crematoriums, you know, in the year 2000, but it was not actively there. So I somehow felt I have no right to paint that aspect of the Holocaust. So what I painted were basically portraits and people, and people as they were before. A few paintings are maybe more specifically Holocaust type images, like the one of the cart, the people escaping. But I don't think I felt I had no right somehow to paint kind of the horror of the Holocaust, because of the immensity of it, because I wasn't there. And like my paintings of, I think I talked about it, I don't know if I talked about it in the Jewish Art Salon, but like, rather than trying to paint 1.5 million children, maybe a painting of one baby, people can identify with that when they know what happened to that one baby. When you hear 1.5 million children were killed, it's a number. And the same way with the animals. If you hear that, you know, I don't know how many thousands of veals are killed a day. It doesn't mean so much when you see one little veal suffering, or you see one cow that suffered. It makes more sense. I don't know if I'm explaining myself.
Absolutely. Well, Dorit, do you want to present our next artist?
Well, thank you for asking me, by the way.
Thank you so much, Diana. And yeah, I don't want to say another word because I'm so touched by that. And I have a lot to say.
Thank you.
But I encourage everybody to go to the link that Yona just put on the chat about the Jewish Art Salon exhibit curated by Joel and Julie. So yeah.
And Dorit, you have beautiful work in that show too. That's where you and I met at the opening, but your work is really, really wonderful.
Thank you, Dave.
Give you a plug.
So our next presenter is Jacob Genen. He is a lifelong resident of New York, based in Astoria, Queens. He makes anthropomorphic art using Victorian era images from the 1800s, coupled with animals. Again, animals, that's great. He incorporates design elements from different cultures around the world and uses them to tell a story of exotic creatures in foreign lands. He makes illustration with digital collage and uses classic printmaker techniques to tell his story of worlds coming together. Jacob, it's all yours.
Hi. Yeah, so I'm a artist and digital designer. I, for the most part, do anthropomorphic images of human-like animal creatures. And been doing it for almost 20 years now of that particular style. And then recently I've been printing them onto canvases and then hand painting them. I do lithographs, I do solar printing, I do a print form, which like an ink transfer onto wood with artist gel or matte medium. And for the most part, like collect tintypes the turn of the century and then create these images. And once I have these, I call them plates. Once I have my plate, then I print them any way I see fit.
Would you like to share your screen or would you like me to share it for you?
You can share it for me.
Okay. And then you can just tell me when to advance. Let me just see here. Okay, so I'm hoping that you're seeing your PDF now, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so you just go ahead and tell me when to move on, okay?
So this was semi-recent. It was like right after the election with all the craziness on January 6th, and then the congresswoman from Georgia who's clearly an anti-Semitic, and the whole, what is it? Comet Ping Pong is like a reference to, I mean, all the nonsense they made up about this pizza place and vampire Jews and cabals and stuff. So, and how we're like lizard people. So it was kind of annoyed me, and I kind of came up with this piece to like throw it in their face, like maybe we are, maybe we do have space lasers, and watch out because we can come for you next.
If only we did.
Yeah.
But and then I also put the original tintype at the bottom just to show that I can where the original images come from. So that tintype is probably like 1893-ish, I would guess. But yeah, so and I've been, from most of the work I've done is black and white, but in the last 3 to 4 years I've been doing more color images. You could go to the next one. So this is also probably my most recent one, is the dove with the olive branch, and then I put it onto canvas and hand painted it. But yeah, again, anthropomorphic and just a new style that I've been working on. You can move to the next one as well. This is also my kids, but they're animal spirits. My son Ezra, he's like a little dinosaur boy. He's a 3.5, almost 4. And he's my Ezrasaurus. And then my daughter Violet is infatuated with fairies and unicorns. So she said, "Daddy, can I get a unicorn?" And I said, "Absolutely," and created that piece as well.
Jack, can you tell a little bit about the techniques you do that? So, and the size, if possible.
The techniques. So I'll find tintypes all over flea markets and eBay, and I go to yard sales. My folks live upstate New York. So I find tintypes in old photography everywhere I go.
Tell about what a tintype is. There might be people who don't know.
A tintype is an early form of photography, like a daguerreotype. So it'd probably be like the 3rd or 4th form of photography of the turn of the century, dating back from the 1860s, and then it kind of went until maybe the 19-teens, as paper became more frequent used and cabinet cards became more frequent used, and it was cheaper to use than tin, that less tin types were created. But it's basically a piece of tin with emulsion. And then if you watch like an old movie where they have a giant camera and they put a curtain over their head and they wait 5 to 10 minutes for an exposure, that was what tintypes were created on. So it was like a 5 to 10 minute exposure, and then it's the earliest form of like a Polaroid.
Thank you.
You can move on to the next slide. This is also fairly recent. I found the card playing dogs. I mean, I found these guys playing cards, and I made it like a classic dogs playing poker. And also next is like one of my earlier ones, which was it's Robert E. Lee as a lobster. So it's Lobster E. Lee. A lot of my stuff is very tongue-in-cheek and has a weird sense of humor to it that I carry into my artwork. But yeah, so these are more like black and white images that I do on a regular. Can move on. When my daughter was like 1.5, she had like a Sophie giraffe toy. So I created it's also one of my earliest colored ones. So yeah, she loved her Sophie the giraffe and she loves the books. And then the other one is there's different types of seamen in the Navy, which I thought was funny at the time. And it was a silly joke because, you know, Fleet Week happens in New York. I've always told the joke, there's so much semen in New York. So again, silly joke. But next one. Also, I'll do research on animals and like the origins of names. So the one on the left is the mayor and the wife of Coney Island. And Coney is a term in Gaelic for rabbit. And then this monkey is wearing a fez and is a Freemason, Shriner, and I like the image. I thought it was funny.
It's very sweet.
You can go to the next slide. These are also more recent within this year. The pangolin and the bat was supposed to be my COVID piece. And then I kind of subdued it because then all this violence towards Asian people came out. So I was, I'll hold off on that until, but you know, in the beginning of COVID, they said it came from a wet market with a pangolin blood and bat blood. And then I researched the bat and it was a horseshoe bat. So this was it's called Wet Market Love, and then the other piece is a Iberian sheep, which is also known as a Jacob sheep. It's a four-horned sheep, and this would have been a doctor from the 1890s. And it was kind of menacing because the vaccine and people getting so scared of the information that was coming out that I figured I'd tell a story of that. And there's so many different people that have different ideas about the vaccine, and there's a lot of misinformation out there that I was getting ridiculous. And I just wanted everybody to be healthy and go to the doctor and get rid of this COVID thing. You can move to the next slide. This was a little before the election with the two dogs. And then the murder hornets was also a little bit before the, it was that summer when everybody said murder hornets are coming to the United States. And it was like one more thing on top of all the things that were going on to like make us scared. So I tried, and this piece is called Murder Hornets Don't Take the Bus. Because they can fly and sting you, but I figured if they're gonna fly from wherever they're from to here, you know, they're probably getting there by themselves. And then the dogs, it's about territorial. You can move to the next slide. I also do wheat pasting in the city. So I've been involved in street art since I was in college. So randomly, I'll mostly sanctioned. I'll wheat paste on walls in Queens and Brooklyn, sometimes in the city. Print them out large and just paste them on walls. It's a good way of promoting your art on the streets. If you want to go around galleries. You can move to the next slide.
So this is a print on the wall that you put there?
Yeah, so it's basically a large printout, And then I use the same kind of glue that they use to post advertisements in the subway or on billboards. So I just basically, I'm gluing them to the wall.
Oh,
And I use polyurethane to mix with my glue so it stays there a little longer.
Huh.
This is a solar print, which is like a lithograph process. And then this is on wood, which is used with art gel and laser copies. And it's just like a very slow process of coating wood in artist gel and then scrubbing away the paper. And then then the image stays onto the wood with the ink. It kind of fuses into the wood with the artist gel. And the technique, it's awesome. It comes out really cool. And then, I mean, the tin types match to the wood. It gives it like that nice like patina feel. So, and also you don't, once it's on wood, I Dremel out the back and I never have to use a frame. So it's just, it hangs all by itself. You can move to the next slide. This, I had a show in the Catskills in Narrowsburg, New York, last November. And this was the show. I had almost 30 pieces in there. And also Mark Ruffalo lives in Narrowsburg or Callicoon, New York. And he was the first person in the gallery and bought a small piece and it made my day. So,
Nice.
it was just a great day and it's awesome to show. You can move to the next slide. And this is my last piece. This is my ode to American Tail, like Five-O the Mouse. But this photo is from the New York Archives. It's the base of the Williamsburg Bridge on the Manhattan side. And I believe this is 1918-ish, 1718. It's from originally in a glass slide. And it's like, Lower East Side, a bunch of young Jewish mice hanging out by the Williamsburg Bridge.
I'm going to make this bigger. I can't quite see the mice, so let me see if I can zoom in.
Oh, yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, if you roll in right at the lower, yeah. But as a kid, I loved the movie American Tail. It was, for the most part, the story of my grandparents too. So, they came here and to Brooklyn and,
That idea of Jews as mice has had legs, if you will, because of course, gosh, I just went blank on his name. Seligmanted mouse, which is rats. Spiegelman, thank you. Sorry. Very nice. Very, very cool. Okay. Wonderful, Jacob. I haven't been looking at the chat, so I don't know if there are questions in there.
I have a question. Jake, first of all, nice to meet you. I've never met you online, even though you probably live like 2 miles from me. I was wondering, do you know, since you mentioned Narrowsburg, do you know Paul Plumidor, who's an artist who lives right nearby there in Milanville, and he exhibits there also?
I don't.
Oh my God, because he also works with animal and figure images. So I'm going to put you both in touch.
Okay.
I mean, it does it very differently from you, but I think you'll enjoy each other.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Jacob. I really like your work.
Oh, thank you very much.
And it's so nice to put those, humanizing those animals, and it's so connecting to the subject we had before as well. Treating each other as animals should we treat them as well. So
yeah, and scientifically we are all animals, so that's kind of the humor to my art and the truth. I mean, with all the things that go on with people, we really are just animals like any other animal. we're
There's one
more wrapped up
creator
into
for-
ourselves.
So animals don't kill for sport. They only kill to eat. They don't kill.
That's true. It's
Yeah.
true. But
Yeah.
Jake, I really appreciate, the diverse use of different kinds of photographic mediums. I'm a photographer by training, and I very much appreciate that you incorporate so many different elements into your work. I found that a lot of it, I sort of was thinking of work by people like Joel Peter Whitkin,
yeah, I'm a big,
which clearly, like, I'm assuming that there's an influence there.
oh, absolutely.
And I loved really sort of the way that you put some of those political issues, right, vis-a-vis COVID and all of those things into the work. But I found that in talking about the work, you sort of seem to pull back a little bit from that, that point of real confrontation, but it's there in the work. And I would encourage you to, to embrace it. Like, it's there and it's powerful.
Thank you.
And so I wouldn't, I would really embrace it. It's very good, powerful work.
Thank you very much. I put it into my work. I'm not really someone who public speaks a lot, or so it's just art is my release. So it's fun to talk about it, but I enjoy just doing it more so. So yeah.
So there are a lot of comments here, Diana, you can ask.
I'm just curious, like your background before maybe I missed, maybe you said at the beginning, but did you start off as a photographer or as a painter, or what?
My mom is a art teacher, so I have a traditional art background, and then I got into digital art at a very young age. So going back to Telly Turtle and figuring it out, and then I went to FIT for computer art and made a life out of that, and I just always did my fine art on the side.
Yeah, because to me, I love them, and they're totally original, and they don't look like most digital art. I mean, most digital artists, their stuff looks digital. I don't know, yours looks like art, like beautiful photographs, and I just love them.
Oh, thank you so much. They're all based off of original photographs from the turn, and then I have such an infinity and love for photography and art that, each one of those tintypes are so special. They're one of a kind, and they're, someone's memories that are so long gone. You go to a flea market, you find boxes and boxes of these tins, and you kind of just wonder about their families and where happened to these people, and like their relatives, that where are they now. So it's super interesting. It's like finding a giant box of Polaroids, but just way older.
I have a bunch of babies tintypes, which I'd be glad to give you, because I don't know what to do with them, and I don't need them. So at some point you'll send me your email.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I'll write it.
I just want to comment that one of the things that I took away from your presentation, Jacob, especially after watching Diana's, is that animals provide us with so much comfort. As we looked at your images, which are so whimsical and funny, and also quirky and mysterious, it just reminded me of the joy and the comfort that we get from having animals around us. So that really kind of fits in with our theme today. I think it's time to go on to our next artist. So thank you, Jacob, very much. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Joel
I'm glad to be a
Silverstein.
part of the
sorry.
art salon as well. Thank you for bringing me in.
It's good to have you here. Joel Silverstein is an artist curator who paints expressionist landscapes, portraits, and interiors, often with Jewish themes, using direct observation, history painting, comics, movie stills, and collage. He is exhibited nationally and internationally. The artist curator is a founding and executive member of the Jewish Art Salon and has curated or advised on 15 Salon exhibitions. His work and curated exhibitions are cited in Ori Z. Solt's book, Tradition and Transformation, 3 millennia of Jewish art and architecture, and Matthew Bagel's Jewish Identity in American Art and a Golden Age since the 1970s. Joel, I'm going to share my screen with your presentation.
Great.
And you tell me when to move on.
Did you put it up? Great. Okay, so before we go on, I want to thank everyone. It's great that you're here on both the holiday weekend and before a Jewish holiday week. I want to thank you just for being here and not being on vacation. I want to thank Judith and Dorit and Yona and the rest of the Salon crew for setting this up always and like having wonderful people. So Jake, I don't know you, but Diana's an old friend of mine. I actually own one of the pieces from that animal rights show that we did as a gift. She gave it to me, so I'm very honored about that. I am a vegan. My wife is much more politically involved in veganism. I am not going to be talking about veganism in this or animal rights in my part of the exhibition. I guess I was put with you two guys initially to talk about it, but I'm going to be talking about my biblically themed work and also my regular paintings and how they relate to. So we're going to be talking about the idea of Jewish art and just being a Jewish artist and being an artist who is a Jew. So we're going to shift a little. So I'm asking you to, like, I guess, take a break, a deep breath, and we're going to go into a little different direction. I'm going to do 2/3 and 1/3. The first third is from a series I started in 2017. It's not finished. It's based on the Tanakh. So they're collage paintings, 36 by 48. They're, fairly large. I like to stack them. And they're collage paintings, mostly portraits. So it's paint and collage, but mostly acrylic paint, mounted on wood, all hand painted. I did each book of the Hebrew Bible. I haven't finished the whole series. So I did about 12. So there's, according to the Masoretic text, there's like 24 books of the Hebrew Bible. It depends how you count them, but I did about half, I guess, vaguely. And then the second part of my talk is going to be about an exhibition I did at Greenkill Gallery, which is in Kingston. David, who's the curator there, is a wonderful guy. And I was in a show. I'm going to be in a show next May and June, actually, with my wife, Julie. So that's going to be a blast. Anyway, so I'm going to show about 2/3 Tanakh and 1/3 regular paintings. You can see the connections. Okay, next. Thank you, Judith, for doing this, by the way. Okay, so this is Genesis. Like I said, I did, if you note, it's 3 feet down, 4 feet across. My take on doing Jewish art is a series of symbolic substitutions, and it could be from observation, it could be from photographs, it could be from movie stills, could be from comic books. I use a lot of imagery from superhero stuff, horror, science fiction, epics, Bible epics. I'm big on painting the 10 Commandments, all that kind of stuff. My goal is not to I'm not a pietist, and I don't believe it serves Jews to be pietists in terms of Jewish text in the realm of Jewish art. I think if you have to read the text, tear it open, try to envision what Adam or Moses or Aaron would look like, and it might be a movie star, it might be a toy, it might be myself, it might be a friend of mine. And I think by keeping the iconology open, it actually has a lot to do with the way Jews think about text and the way traditional rabbinic Jews think about text. So anyway, this is Genesis. I use the Christopher Lee Frankenstein for Adam, and he's kind of like a frail, failed Adam. The girl to the left in the bikini is from Frankenstein Created Woman. The guy on the left is either the snake or God himself. I'm not going to tell you which, so you might think, again, a pietist or a nihilist. It's up to you. That character on the left is a Jack Kirby character who's one of my idols. Jack Kirby was probably the greatest comic book artist of the 20th century, and it's a kind of brain guy named MODOK that he invented, and Marvel actually did a cartoon recently. Jack Kirby's long dead. But so I used it. The background is a Renaissance painting. If you see, there's the tree of good and evil in the back with Adam and Eve, and the angel chasing Adam and Eve out. And there's that red disc, which is probably like an emanation from God from the original painting. The paintings are all done in these cardboard trifoils. And then I mount them on wood, the way you would like a Renaissance and early medieval painting. And there are a lot of layers of acrylic paint. None of it is photographed. All of it is eyeballed. Like if I see a photograph, I'll hand paint it in scale. Don't use a side projector. It's all out of my head while watching very carefully. Next. Thanks. This is Exodus. This is the young Moses in the book. The rabbis make him middle-aged. I made him. I'm from Coney Island when I was a kid, so he's a bather in Brighton. He is wearing a Michelangelo Moses t-shirt, so that's the Moses he's going to grow into. There's a towel over his back, but it's kind of like a cape. The background is from photos of Sinai. The burning bush is the ark from Dura Europus. I don't want to get into the whole thing, but Dura was a fully formed muraled synagogue from the 245, so what is that, 3rd century, 2nd century AD, influenced Greco-Roman, Jewish, Persian, Greek, this whole melange. If you don't know it as a Jewish artist, you should look it up. But I took it from the ark in Dura, and then inside are flames, and the flames is the burning bush, but it's also like the Holocaust. The angel on the bottom is the Metaluna mutant from This Island Earth. It's an old 50s sci-fi movie. And there's little bits of collage. I'm pointing, but I don't know if you can see me point. At the bottom, there's little figures and stuff like that. That's from National Geographic, but the rest of it is hand painted. Okay, next.
What's the size of it, Joe?
These are all 3 by 4 feet. Okay, this is Numbers, and it's Bamidbar, which is the wandering part, in the wilderness. And I actually got this from, I do a lot of study in these too, which is wonderful about being an artist and being a Jewish artist in particular, because you kind of have to know your stuff. Even if you screw it up, which every artist has the right to screw things up, you have to screw it up in an intelligent manner. So this is based on a Fayum portrait. The Fayum portraits are the best portraits we have of the Greco-Roman Egyptian era. They're from the 1st to the 4th centuries. This is about from 170, I think. It's a guy. Fayum is about 100 miles outside of Cairo, but it was also ancient Crocodipolis. And when they say Greek, it's coin. They say coin. So all that was the Egyptian, Greek, Roman city in that area. We found this catch of these amazing portraits that are as painted as beautifully as Velázquez could have, to kind of crude icon painters. But to me, that represented what biblical people might have looked like. And this guy is obviously like kind of multiracial. He's Mediterranean, a little African, little, what ancient Hebrews would have looked like, or the mixed multitude that were walking with Moses. So I consciously wanted him to be a kind of like Mediterranean African kind of guy. And it was also inspired by a friend of mine who I taught with, who was from Trinidad. So, and the format is exactly the way Fayum portraits were. There's a small panel painting and a larger painting. These were for mummies. When you died, you wanted a nice portrait that your relatives or people could remember you in a good way. So, and this, you can see the Sinai wilderness in the background. And again, it's photos really of Sinai. I have these books that I draw things on. And frogs from the Exodus story I have in there too. Okay, next. This is Isaiah, and this is my take on Isaiah. It's the Henry Cavill Superman. So this is Isaiah 1. I did Isaiah 1 and Isaiah 2. Yona put a note. Actually, Richard and I curated the Dura Europus project, which was about 50 artists did takes on Dura. And we had it at the Philadelphia Museum of Art and UJA in New York. And actually, Ori Salties, I don't know if he's on today, but he actually may be talking about this, that he's doing a presentation later in the week, but he wrote about our show. So I just want to let you know. Anyway, so Isaiah to me is like a superhero. And again, Isaiah talks about Emmanuel, who for Christians represent Jesus, but for Jews is much more problematic and weird. Could be a proto-messianic figure, could be Isaiah's own son, could be a symbol for Israel. We don't know, right? Christians take it as, oh, Emmanuel means Christ. He doesn't for Jews at all, but it's some kind of shadowy, heroic figure that's going to save Israel in some way. So I was always very intrigued with that. So this is Superman. In the back is the God of creation. You can see like pumpkins and lotus flowers and all kinds of stuff. The figures in the back are from the Amsterdam Haggadah. You can see some of it is cut out, but I use those figures a lot. There are engravings from the Amsterdam Haggadah. So I am very involved with, as a Jewish artist, the idea of the metaphysical as an artist, how artists relate to the metaphysical. So that's like Gauguin and Van Gogh, who are not Jews, but how a Jew as an outsider to the Western tradition relates to the Western tradition. So even though it's been filtered through the second commandment or ignoring the second commandment or how German Jews thought about the second commandment, for me, there are people like Kitai and Philip Guston. It is incredibly important that we are artists and we are Jews and how Jews think about those things. So next. This is Isaiah 2, and it is an image of God. This is Brainiac from the Superman comics, Silver Age, like early 60s. And it's how God moves the empires around as like chess pieces on a chessboard. Although, you know, Isaiah doesn't use those terms because chess was Indian and wasn't around in Bible times. But it's kind of like how the movement of empires is actually what God does and how Israel is involved with that. So yeah, Superman, and again, there are figures from the Amsterdam Haggadah about the plagues, and the back are the actual engravings from the Amsterdam Haggadah. So I mix the kind of modern and traditionally Jewish and Western art, all in the same kind of image. Next. This is Josiah, who is the prophet that married the prostitute Gomer. And he's a real interesting character. Archie Rand has done a painting on that. Richard and I talk about this all the time. They had 3 kids. God commands Josiah to marry a prostitute Gomer, and she's a stand-in for Israel, and Israel is kind of like not faithful to God. So there's this whole running image of how Israel whores over other gods, and that's really bad, and Israel better get its act together. The image itself, the way I painted him was like a Byzantine icon. So it's the kind of stylistic influences of early Greek painting. If you notice the hands, I got rid of a Jesus figure would have done a pantocrator kind of hand gesture like that. I got rid of that because I'm doing Jewish, but it's more like this kind of blessing kind of hand movement. And there's some photo stuff. There's my behind in that painting, behind the prophet. It's supposed to be the first son. I forgot his name. Oh, Jezreel is the first son out of the 3 kids. And it's, again, this is flatter than I usually paint. I kind of wanted that feeling more of a Byzantine mosaic. Next. This is Jonah, and this was my take on Jonah. It was a lot of fun. A friend of mine, as in my 20s, I took photos of my friends for Bible paintings that I never did until I was like 50. So this is like a long time ago. On the left, again, are figures from the Amsterdam Haggadah. Instead of the story, which has Jonah and the whale, I did it more midrashic, which is Jonah at the bottom of the ocean being tutored by the Shekhinah. Was my take on it, but it turns out there are midrashim like that. The image on the right is from Sedrena, was for many years the only book on Jewish art. I think her name is Gabrielle Sedrena. And that cover is a synagogue near Tiberias. It's called Hamath, I think. I guess Stephen Fine, if you're on, you can correct me later. But it's a synagogue floor mosaic when Jews actually put visual imagery in their synagogues before medieval times. If you look in the Greco-Roman period, it was chock full of visual imagery. This is an image of the autumn, of fall. And I took her as the Shekhinah, which is the female aspect of God, and she's actually coaching Jonah. So you see the eels kind of floating around. He can breathe at the bottom of the ocean. He doesn't have any problem. And again, I'm very there's a whole thing for me in this metaphysical quest in art. But for me, I grew up with superhero comics. I'm a big comic book historian and stuff. There's a real parallel between like traditional kind of midrashic thought and biblical thought and rabbinical thought and kind of modern Jewish authors and how they, Superman and, Batman and like how those images became iconographic and kind of low-level Jewish symbology in that. So I always mix that stuff together. Next. This is Lamentations, and it's the destruction of the temple. And I painted myself. It's a self-portrait. I'm in a gas mask, like in World War I and II. World War I specifically. I'm very moved by those Otto Dix etchings. If you've ever seen them, they're amazing. Otto Dix was a soldier and a victim of the war, and he did a lot of this gas mask imagery and corpses and stuff like that. So this is the destruction of the temple, and I have the trees coming back. Although the imagery is very particular, saying the trees, guess what? The trees aren't coming back, but I painted the trees coming back over the ruins, and I'm holding a machete, just like the Friday the 13th movie. So I'm kind of like my own serial killer. So it's aspects of God as the destroyer and God as the creator and the redeemer, all in the same kind of image. And it's in a self-portrait. Okay, next. This is Ezekiel, and Richard did a whole series on Ezekiel. Archie did. I'm gonna give shout outs to those. I see myself kind of in a peer group, Richard, Archie Rance, Yona Benjamin, David Wander, other people in the Salon, Yona at times, other people in the Salon that take biblical imagery and kind of make it modern. And there's a whole real, because when you're gonna do the Bible or when you're gonna do something from the Tanakh, most of the art world really ignores you very strenuously or kind of dismisses you out of hand. And for me, it's a real interesting idea about what is the Jewish imagination and how modern people can use Jewish text in a contemporary way that is very stirring and very emotional and very imaginative. And I do other paintings, but you'll see in my regular paintings, there's a lot of Jewish influence about the same kind of imagery. So, and in the Jewish Art Salon, I think it's one of the real safe places we can talk about that. In a Chelsea gallery, it would be a lot, although, Archie right now on the Lower East Side has a show up about the prophets done in a very crazy kind of way. So again, if we are the cutting edge, that's fantastic. If we're not, I'm still doing what we're gonna do. So the reason why I did this, this is Ezekiel. Ezekiel brings up the image of the Valley of Dry Bones, and the Jews are all gonna come back after they've been destroyed from the destruction of the Second Temple and being dragged into exile in Babylon. The image itself is from the portrait of Dorian Gray done by Ivan Albright, who's one of my great unsung painters. He was very famous in the 40s. He was a surreal, expressionist, kind of magic realist painter. The reason why I made Ezekiel himself with the aspect of a corpse is that for me, Ezekiel sees people coming back from the dead and he takes on the aspect of a corpse. So that was my midrashic take on it. The background is from the engraving of Gustave Dorit, who's a big favorite of mine too, who was a Frenchman who did engravings from the Bible. So I rendered a black and white engraving into color. It's a blue underpainting with black and white and color on top of that. And so I actually went to Chicago to look at this painting, which is an amazing, it's right near Chagall's White Crucifixion, which like blew my mind. And those of you who don't know that painting also, it's like Chagall's take on a Jewish Jesus is so stirring and so important to Jewish art. Anyway, so next. Okay, so we're in my regular paintings and you can see stylistically very similar and hopefully in some ways more freewheeling, but the same. I'm the same Joel. If I do Jewish stuff, non-Jewish stuff, this is me, like me, not like me, I don't know. So this is a portrait of my son Jake, who's he's not home at the moment. Huh? What was that, Dorit? So I guess she's muted. Anyway,
Joel.
Just
go ahead.
Okay. So this is a portrait of my son Jake. He's 23. This was done when he was 19. He looks a little younger, I think, in my mind's eye. I painted him like I grew up in Orthodox Brooklyn. I'm not Orthodox myself, but I'm very aware and sensitive to issues of Orthodox culture. And a lot of my friends still are through the Salon, but were Orthodox as a kid. And I went to Siyums and I went to Orthodox shul for bar mitzvahs and all that kind of stuff. One of the things in those days was Orthodox kids dressed up more than the secular kids do, and they wore vests and stuff with dress shirts, even on a regular day. So I dressed my son in that kind of garb. He has his fingers to his temple as if he's thinking. He's surrounded by all the superhero stuff of my studio. It's like a creature from the Black Lagoon. Action 1 with Superman is on the top right. There's a mad scientist, Dr. Fate, and the roses, by the way, are plastic. They're not real. So next. This is self-portrait. This was at the last show I did at the Greenkill Gallery, and I did about 15 paintings. This is confronting death. It's called Reckoning. And the graveyard is real, and it's at my studio window, so the graveyard keeps on coming up. It's a Catholic graveyard. I tend to omit the crosses in it. But it's a universal theme of like artwork in the face of death. There's Slimer from Ghostbusters. There's an old 60s kind of stress ball. An alligator, there's an alien from Area 59, whatever it is, a Thor bust. The roses, again, are phony and plastic. I have my Hulk shirt on and me looking kind of stern, usually more stern than in my regular life, but that's my art face, I guess. Next, and it's 2 canvases put together. This is called The Stranger or Stranger in a Strange Land. Again, the biblical reference to Moses, and it's about alienation and about the book, The Stranger, the Camus book, which is an existential classic. Again, the view from my studio window, it's the graveyard. In this case, it's a dreamer waking from the dream. These are studio props, which I have a ton of. They're very large. It's a dog, meaning fidelity, the alligator, meaning aggression. There's a vulture, also aggression, and a Godzilla doll, and the flowers, which are life. But in this end, it's all phony because it's all plastic and everything. So it's interesting. I kind of made it a sun deck. I have a view out my roof, but I don't use it, but I wanted that inside outside look. Next. Now, the reason why I brought, and I have to read this actually, so just give me a second. Richard, Yona, and I were lucky enough to work with Stephen Fine, who might be on the call today. Stephen Fine is, I'm going to read this, Chergin Professor of Jewish History, and he's the director of the Yeshiva University Center for Israel Studies. We worked with him on The Samaritans, A Biblical People, which is an exhibition that's going to be, I guess, in a year or less, and it's going to be at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, and it's going to be in Frankfurt, and maybe in Israel, we'll see. But I asked Stephen if it's okay to talk about this. So we had to do one painting each, and I chose the Samaritan, have their own version of Joshua. I never did Joshua for myself, so I did the Samaritan version. Samaritan version was written later. The Samaritans, you might know the Samaritans either from your own studies of Judaism or the Samaritan story from the New Testament, the Good Samaritan. There's another reference to Samaritan in one of the Gospels, I think. Anyway, the Samaritans are Israelite people. They are not Jews. We share a lot with them. They do not have the Talmud, but they have their version of the Torah, which they venerate. They have Mount Gerizim instead of Mount Sinai, which is their mountain in the north. There's still about 1,000 of them living in northern Israel and other communities in Tel Aviv, other places. They're really fascinating people. So in this version of Joshua, the Israelite army gets imprisoned. There's this king Shobach, who's the king of it's the Arameans, but in this version of the story, they're the Armenians, who are Greeks actually. So it was written later under the Muslims. So this is the second version of the story. I wanted to do this king whose mom is a witch. So I painted her as Margaret Hamilton in the Wizard of Oz, and she on the left, that's Margaret Hamilton. That's his mom. This is just before the Israelites break in. He's going to wind up killing his mom, and he dies himself. So this is a king. It's kind of like a Rembrandt kind of portrait where he's a king that's going to lose everything, including his life. And I wanted that kind of, oh my God, all this stuff is going to happen. If you notice, it's the exact same figure as the stranger character in the other painting, and I've used that before. He's a bather from Brighton Beach. So he's a Russian guy who was kind of buff but bald, about 45 years old, who between the water and the sun put his hand over his face. So I took the snapshot. It was so real to me, and it stood for so much because it could be resting, shame, sleeping. Like, it held so much meaning for me that I keep on reusing this figure. I dressed the figure up in a chiton, which is a Greek toga, and I dressed a dummy up in my studio and made the chiton myself and dressed him up, painted it blue. And the background are figures from a child's Bible. And the lion on the right is a Greek statue. So I did kind of peg him to kind of being a Greek king. So I just wanted to show you my process, in that I take a figure and then reuse them. So if it's real, it's real, it's not real. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a fantasy I'm creating. Next. This is the last image I wanted to talk today because I know we're short on time kind of, and I'm very grateful you let me blather on this long. This I just finished about 2 weeks ago, and it's called Stuart Little Meets Godzilla. So you can see, even in my non-Jewish works, there's a lot of Jewish content. And again, some of this I'm not going to tell you because it's like secret between me and God. The car is a Stuart Little car that's real in my studio. The Godzilla, and Godzilla has a kid, if you don't know, Godzuki or Minya. So I painted Godzilla and her kid, because Godzilla is kind of bisexual and gives birth to her own children. In the background is Egypt. So it's on the right side. I do this a lot where it's a place, but it's different places. So I did that with the Jerusalem Biennial. I had New York and Israel and Jerusalem. So on this, it's Tokyo and ancient Egypt. So on the right is Tokyo, and I made up the flames and all that stuff. Godzilla is holding a train. It could be the F train from Brooklyn, which is what I grew up with. And then it's the Ramesseum from Egypt, but this is the kind of chaotic god of Exodus that overturns empires. And so if you notice, the Egyptian statues are toppled and all that stuff. On the top left is a place called Crocodipolis, which is the temple. That temple became Fayum, which is where I get the portraits from. So there was a Greco-Roman temple that worshiped the crocodile, and that has become like an image in my works. There's some dreamlike thing about that I keep on returning to, and my role as a Jew and what that Jew Hebrew would have been in the ancient world vis-a-vis Egypt. That's a whole kind of literary art journey that, you know, I will explain to you guys, you know, and it's very kind of important to firing my art imagination. And so even in my crazy secular works, that idea is still there. So I'm gonna end it here. I guess we're done. And if there's questions or.
Well, this was just fascinating, amazing, and so exciting to see your work. This is such a beautiful painting, and each of them is just a whole story. It's like we could sit on each of the painting, and there is more and more to see and talk about. So if please go on and jump in if you want to ask any question. Go ahead.
I just thank you. This was all fascinating. I was just wondering what your kids think of your art.
My kids? My son is a computer animator and an artist, and we talk about it a lot. He's not interested in Jewish artwork at all, but we share the same culture, comics, movies. We just saw The Green Knight last night on HBO, if you can see it. Jewish, Christian, Muslim, or wherever you are, that is an incredible art movie. And again, about this metaphysical quest and moral quest. So we share some things, but not others. So.
Thank you.
This is just a great way to start a Shana Hadasha, like a new year. And I want to thank you, all of you, for presenting. It was just a great session, and I enjoyed every moment of it. I want to just remind you all that the next session is going to be on September 19 with Gabriela Boros, Efrat Baller, and Sandra Indig. So I want to wish you all Shana Tova. Shana Tova umetuka. Here from
Shana
Israel.
Tova.
Thank you,
And
Shana
to you
Tova.
all over the world where you are.
See you in a few
Thank you
weeks.
very much.
Shana
Thank you.
Tova to
Lovely.
everyone.
Thanks,
Shana
everyone.
Tova, Shana Tova.
Thank you.
Shana Tova.
Hello, everybody.
And see you on the 19th. Don't forget.